The galaxy was full of ruins, silent worlds, empty cities, dead empires that once ruled with pride but were now nothing more than dust among the stars. Everyone knew this truth. Empires rose and empires fell. That was the natural way of things. But deep inside the forbidden archives of the Galactic Council, a single Zeran historian discovered something far darker, something that should never have been found. His name was Kale Draven, and he was not looking for trouble. He was simply a historian who loved digging into the past, piecing together stories that others had forgotten. But Kale had always been curious, too curious, and that was dangerous in a galaxy where curiosity could get you killed. It began with a single report, a dusty fragment from an ancient empire called the Veyran Dominion, a power that once stretched across hundreds of systems. The record described their glory, their fleets, their riches, until suddenly their empire was gone. Not conquered, not overthrown, simply erased. The document ended with one line, burned into the page as if by fire. They came from the void. They bore the mark of man. Kyle frowned when he first read it. Man? What did that mean? Some old species? Translation error. But the more he looked, the stranger it became. In other archives, among the ruins of the Trav Coalition, he found the same word, buried in fragmented reports, always written with the same fear, always just before extinction. Man, human, earth, different words, the same meaning. Kyle should have stopped. Any historian would have. But instead, he dug deeper. He requested access to restricted data nodes, pretending it was for routine study. He bribed minor officials for keys into private files. And at last, he found his way into the Forbidden Archives, the place where the Galactic Council locked away truths they did not want the galaxy to see. There, the pattern grew clearer. The Zenathi Imperium, gone in a single century. The Drathan Collective, erased in less than a decade. The Varun Empire, wiped out in one night of fire. All of them had one thing in common. Their final records always spoke of the same shadow, the same name. Humanity. Kyle sat in his dark study, screens glowing with forbidden text when the message arrived. It was not a request. It was a command. Historian Kale Draven. Cease your research immediately. These matters are restricted by the order of the Galactic Council. Any further violation will be considered treason. Kyle's spines stiffened, his heart pounded. Treason? For studying history? He turned the message off and stared at the data one more time. The Council wanted silence. They wanted him blind. But why? Why hide the truth about the fallen empires? Why erase the name of humanity from history? The warning should have scared him. Instead, it did the opposite. It fueled his hunger. He began mapping the star charts. One by one, he plotted the coordinates of the empires that had fallen. He studied the dates, the sudden silences, the lost fleets. The lines began to connect, not randomly, not naturally, but with intent. It was as if an invisible hand moved through history, striking down empires that reached too far, that grew too arrogant, and that hand always carried the same signature, humanity. Kyle whispered to himself, his voice shaking, "This cannot be chance. This is a pattern." But the deeper he looked, the colder the truth became. The humans were not simply conquerors. They were not like the other powers. They did not invade, enslave, or demand tribute. No. The record showed something worse. The humans only appeared when provoked, when challenged, when someone crossed them. And when that happened, entire civilizations ceased to exist. Late one cycle, Kyle found something new, something even the Council had failed to erase. It was a recording, grainy, broken but still intact. A desperate voice crackled through the speakers. "This is Admiral Varus of the Trav Coalition. We tried to strike their colonies. We thought them weak. But they are not weak. They are The message cut into static. Kyle played it again and again, but the ending was lost. He leaned back in his chair, shaking. The Tarav coalition had been mighty. They had fleets beyond counting, and yet they were dust now. Whatever humanity was, they had turned empires. Into ash, words spread quietly. Kyle was not careful enough. Whispers traveled. Soon his colleagues avoided him. His friends refused to meet him. Even his mentors warned him to stop before it was too late. But Kyle could not stop. The weight of history pressed on him. The galaxy had lived for thousands of years in lies, in silence, and he, Kyle Draven, was staring at the truth. Every extinct empire had one thing in common. Every fallen power made the same mistake. They all challenged humans. One night, as Kale pored over data, the lights in his chamber flickered. The doors opened, though he had locked them. A figure entered, tall and cloaked, their face hidden, their voice a whisper of steel. "You dig too deep, historian." Kyle's throat tightened. "Who are you?" The figure did not answer. Instead, they leaned closer and whispered 4 words that froze his blood. "They are not gone." And just like that, the figure turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving the doors wide open and Kyle trembling in silence. Kyle sat frozen at his desk, the forbidden archives glowing before him. His claws shook as he pulled up the maps one last time. Every empire, every extinction, every whisper of fear. Humans, always humans. But now, one thought echoed louder than all the rest. If they were not gone, if they were still out there, then perhaps the galaxy's greatest nightmare was not in the past at all. It was waiting in the dark. Every empire that had fallen left behind ruins, but the ruins never told the whole story. Kyle Draven knew this better than anyone. He had seen the scraps of records, the fragments of warnings. But now, as he sat alone, in his study chamber, he felt the weight of something far greater pressing on him. He had uncovered the name Humanity, buried in layers of forbidden archives. He had seen the erased maps, the censored documents, the final cries of long-dead fleets. He had even been visited by a cloaked stranger who whispered 4 words that refused to leave his mind. "They are not gone." Kyle could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard those words. Every time he dreamed, he saw fire in the stars. He told himself he was only a historian, that this was not his fight, that the council had warned him for a reason. But he also knew the truth. If the galaxy had lived in silence for so long, then someone had to speak. He began to notice patterns beyond the written records. Reports of ships vanishing near forgotten sectors. Colonies that stopped transmitting without warning. Patrol fleets that set out proud and strong but never returned. At first, these were dismissed as natural disasters, as piracy, as accidents. But when Kale laid them side by side, a chilling picture emerged. The disappearances followed the same shape as the old extinctions. A silent trail, moving through history like a shadow. Kale's hands shook as he replayed intercepted logs, fragments of desperate captains shouting as their comms cut off. One message from a border outpost made his scales crawl. "This is Station 14. We're under attack. Unknown vessels. No identification." The voice broke into static, then silence. The report had been marked as a pirate raid, but the technology described did not match pirates. It matched nothing known. He carried this evidence to his closest confidant, a council diplomat named Jeren Sol. Jeren was cautious, careful with his words, but Kyle trusted him. When Kyle showed the data, Jeren's eyes narrowed. He leaned closer, voice barely above a whisper. "You must not speak of this outside this room," Jeren said. "The Council has suppressed these patterns for centuries. They fear panic. They fear awakening something that should stay asleep." Kyle's spine stiffened. "So you know." "I know enough," Jeren said. "Every historian who digs too far vanishes. Their work is erased. Their names are forgotten. Do you want that? The fate But Kale's curiosity was stronger than fear. He pressed Jaren for answers, and slowly, reluctantly, the diplomat told him more. Entire fleets had been ordered into silent missions, classified beyond the highest level. Their task: investigate signals that matched the old human transmissions. Not a single one had returned. Kyle could feel his heart pounding in his chest. And yet you hide this? You let the galaxy believe it was chance? That empires simply collapsed? What would you have us do? Jaren snapped. Tell the galaxy that the oldest nightmare still waits out there? That the reason for every extinction was not time, not weakness, but humanity itself? The words hung heavy between them. Humanity. A name spoken only in whispers. A word that most considered a myth. A ghost story told in hushed tones. Kyle left Jaren's chamber more determined than ever. If the council feared the truth, then the truth was too important to remain hidden. He began to compile his findings into a secret archive of his own, something the council could not erase so easily. He stored fragments of logs, erased maps, testimonies from the few who dared speak. Piece by piece, the silence of the past began to take shape. The more he worked, the more he realized a terrifying pattern. Humanity never struck first. The records always showed the same beginning. An empire rose, it grew arrogant, it pushed into territories marked with warnings. And then, silence. Humanity never boasted. They never declared war. They simply ended it in their own way, until nothing remained of their enemy. Ketchel stared at the old message from Admiral Veras again. We thought them weak, but they are not weak. They are... And then the silence. What had the Admiral seen? What had he faced that froze his last words forever? The silence of the galaxy weighed heavier now. It was no longer the silence of ruins, but of fear. The kind of silence that comes before a storm. Kale began to suspect that the humans were not gone at all. They were watching. They were waiting. And the moment the galaxy grew too bold, they would rise again. That night, as Kale worked late into the hours, his screens flickered. Lines of code appeared where no input had been given. A single phrase repeated across his monitors, written in a language not used in millennia. He translated it slowly, his claws trembling as he read the words aloud. We remember. The words echoed in his chamber, on every glowing screen, until the lights cut out and the room fell into darkness. Kyle sat frozen, unable to breathe. The warnings were not only in the past, they were alive, here, now. The silence of fallen empires was not history, it was a message, a promise, and he had just awakened it. Kale Draven had not slept in 3 cycles. The words still haunted him, glowing across every monitor, burned into his mind like fire. We remember. It was not a fragment of the past. It was a message from the present. Someone, or something, had reached into his private systems and written those words. That meant humanity was not only a legend. They were still out there. He had locked every door, checked every shadow, even scanned for cloaked surveillance. Yet the silence in his chamber felt heavy, like unseen eyes pressed against his back. The Council's warning no longer sounded like a threat. It felt like desperation. They were not hiding the truth to keep historians quiet. They were hiding it to keep the galaxy from screaming. Still, Kale could not stop. He had gone too far. The mystery now consumed him more than fear. He needed to know more, and that need drove him into dangers he could not yet see. The next step was to follow the traces left in half-erased records. The word humanity appeared often, sometimes as man, sometimes as earthborn, sometimes simply Terrans. But one particular fragment stood out, an encrypted report from the Vorun Empire, dated just before their annihilation. It read, "The name of their cradle must never be spoken. The Council forbids it. Those who utter it vanish. But we have learned it, and it will be our triumph. We will strike at their origin and end the fear forever. We will strike at... The text ended mid-sentence, abruptly severed. Yet hidden beneath layers of security, Kyle found 3 letters in ancient galactic code, EAR. Kyle whispered the sound, letting it roll on his tongue. Ear... Tut. He did not understand the word, but it made his skin prickle. It was not just a location. It was forbidden knowledge, buried so deep that the Council had nearly erased it from existence. Nearly, but not fully. The next day, Kyle requested access to the Council's deep cartographic archives. He claimed it was for academic study on extinct worlds, but the clerk on duty stared at him for too long, as if weighing his soul. When the access codes arrived, Kyle's spines tingled with dread. The Council was watching, they knew, and yet they let him in. Inside the archives, he searched for the word Earth. The system denied him again and again, flashing red warnings across. The screen restricted, sealed by Council order, level infinity. No historian had clearance that high, no one did. But Kyle had learned the Council's weaknesses. He worked around the codes, traced faint echoes of erased coordinates. It was like following a trail of smoke across the stars, and slowly the shape of something hidden began to emerge. A system sealed in silence, a world marked not as destroyed, not as uninhabited, but as Class 0, do not approach. His breath caught. Every world in the galaxy was classified with a number from Class 1, habitable, to Class 5, lethal. But Class 0? He had never seen it before. The Council had invented a new category for this one place alone, a category that meant no one was allowed to even speak its name. Kyle whispered again, Earth. The moment he said it aloud, alarms. Triggered, his access terminal went dark and the doors to the archive slammed shut. Red lights flooded the chamber. A cold voice filled the air. Historian Kyle Draven, you have crossed into forbidden knowledge. Remain where you are. Security is en route. Kyle's hearts thundered. He grabbed a datapad and copied what fragments he could before the terminal burned out. Then he ran, through corridors, past startled clerks, until he slipped into the underlevels of the city, vanishing into the maze of steel and shadows. That night, hidden in an abandoned storage vault, Kyle replayed the fragments. Coordinates, blurred but still, there. A system far from the Council's core, shrouded in dead sectors, a place every map pretended did not exist, and yet someone, somewhere, still protected it. As he stared at the coordinates, his comm unit buzzed. He hesitated before answering, but curiosity overcame caution. A voice whispered through static, "You should not have spoken the name." Kyle's claws tightened around the device. "Who is this?" Silence. Then the same phrase again, colder. This time, "You should not have spoken the name." The line went dead. Kyle sat in the dark, every hair on his body raised. The word was cursed. The Council erased it from the archives. The stranger had warned him in his chamber, and now even the shadows seemed to speak it back to him. Earth, the cradle of humanity. The place every extinct empire had touched before. They vanished. The place that was not supposed to exist. Kyle realized then that he had crossed a line he could never retreat from. He was no longer a historian searching for truth. He was a fugitive holding the galaxy's most dangerous secret, and somewhere in the dark, he felt it, the silent weight of something vast, something ancient, watching him. Not history, not memory, something alive, something waiting. Humanity was not gone. They were hidden, and Kyle had just spoken their forbidden name aloud. The stars above the Ziran capital world glimmered like scattered diamonds. But to Kyle Draven, they no longer felt beautiful. They felt like eyes, watching, waiting, silent. He could not forget. The coordinates he had uncovered. A system marked Class 0, a system erased from every chart, but still real, still pulsing with danger. Earth. The forbidden name still burned in his mind. He had whispered it only once, and yet it felt as if the entire galaxy had heard him. For days, Kyle moved like a shadow through the city's underlevels. He avoided the Council's patrols, ducked into dark corridors whenever surveillance drones passed. The Council was hunting him. He could feel it in the way clerks looked twice at him, in the way doors refused to open at his codes. He was no longer a respected historian. He was prey. Still, he did not stop. His datapad contained the fragments he had stolen, coordinates, records, transmissions. He studied them every night until his vision blurred. And then, one cycle, something new appeared. A signal. It was faint, almost erased by cosmic noise, but it pulsed in a steady rhythm. Not natural, not random. A code. He cleaned it, slowed it, translated it through ancient language matrices. The words formed slowly, piece by piece, until his claws trembled around the screen. We remember. The same phrase that had appeared in his study. The same voice from the shadows. But this time, it was not a hack. It was a transmission, coming from the dead sectors, near the forbidden coordinates of Earth. Kyle's first instinct was to bury it, to pretend he had never seen it. But his curiosity was stronger. He carried the data to Jeren's soul, the only man he trusted. When Jeren read the signal, his face went pale. "You should not have this." "Then you admit it," Kyle said. "It's real." Jeren's jaw tightened. He closed the datapad with a snap. "You don't understand. That phrase is always the first sign. The first whisper before ships vanish, before colonies go dark. It is not a message. It is a warning." Kyle leaned forward, his voice shaking. "Warning of what?" Jeren did not answer. Instead, he stood, went to the door, and locked it. Only. Then did he speak, his voice low. "Fleets have been sent into those sectors before, secretly, quietly, none returned. No wreckage, no signals, only silence. And then, weeks later, we find ruins, stations abandoned, colonies erased. The Council calls it natural decay. But I know better. I've seen the pattern, and now you have too." Kyle's breath caught. "You mean they're still out there?" Jeren looked him in the eye. "If you believe the myths, yes. If you believe the records, yes. Humanity is not extinct. They are something else, something the galaxy was never meant to awaken." Before Kyle could answer, a tremor shook the chamber. Alarms flared across the city. Jeren rushed to the window and Kyle followed. High above, patrol fleets streaked into the sky. Not drills, not exercises, real deployment. A voice cracked through the public speakers. "All citizens remain calm. A derelict has been discovered in the outer rim. All information is classified." Kyle's spine stiffened. A derelict. He knew what that meant. That night, reports leaked through the underworld channels. A patrol ship had stumbled across a massive station drifting in the void. Not alien, not Veyron, not Xenathi. The design matched nothing in galactic records, but it bore one clear insignia, a 5-pointed star. Kyle sat frozen as he read the whispers. His claws traced the crude sketches, smuggled from the wreck. He did not know the symbol, but something in him felt it. Ancient, human. The Council moved quickly. Entire fleets were dispatched to secure the derelict. But before they could even reach it, the patrol ship that had found it went silent. No distress call, no wreckage, only silence. Kyle replayed the intercepted logs from that crew, voices crackling with fear. "We entered the station, lights still burning, systems still humming. This place, it's not dead." And then, static. Kyle could not breathe. The humans had left, something behind. Not ruins, not a grave, a trap. Jeren came to him in the dead of night, pale and shaking. The Council will not say it, but I will. We are already too late. That station should never have been touched. Every time someone disturbs their shadows, they strike back. That is their pattern. That is why empires fall. Kyle asked the question he already feared. Then what happens now? Jaren's eyes were dark. Now? Now the Council will pretend nothing is wrong. They will lie to the people. But in the quiet places of the galaxy, in the dark between the stars, the ghosts are already moving. That very night, Kyle intercepted another signal. Stronger this time, clearer. It came not from the Council, not from pirates, not from any empire. It came from the direction of the derelict. This is not your place. Kyle dropped the data pad. The voice was human, not distorted, not broken. Human. For a long time he sat in silence, listening to the stars hum outside his window, and in that silence he knew the truth. The humans were not myths, they were not extinct, they were still here, waiting in the dark, watching every empire grow bold, watching every fleet push too far. And when the time was right, when the warnings were ignored, the ghosts among the stars would rise again. Kyle whispered the name under his breath, as if daring the void to answer. Him. Humanity. Somewhere in the deep black, far beyond the reach of the Council, a signal pulsed back. We remember. The galaxy had gone quiet. Too quiet. Kyle Draven felt it in the streets of the Zeran capital, in the stiff silence of council chambers, in the absence of news that should have been everywhere. Entire fleets had been sent toward the derelict station, and yet no updates came, no reports, no triumphant broadcasts of discovery. Only silence. That silence was more terrifying than any war. Kyle had lived his life buried in archives, but now history was unfolding in front of him. He checked the underworld channels constantly. The whispers passed between smugglers, deserters, and traders who lived outside the Council's polished lies. The story was the same every time. Fleets entering. The dead sector. Fleets vanishing without a trace. At first, Kyle tried to believe the Council's excuses. Subspace storms, pirate ambushes, technical failures. But the numbers grew too large. One fleet could be explained. 2, maybe. But 5, 10, entire armadas swallowed by the dark. No, this was not chaos. This was a hand moving deliberately. Just as the old records had shown, humanity had been stirred. Kyle's friend, Jaren Saul, was one of the few diplomats who dared speak honestly with him. They met in secret now, far from cameras, in the abandoned tunnels beneath the capital. Jaren's face was gaunt, his voice low. "They're retaliating," he whispered. "I warned them. I begged the Council to leave the station alone, to seal it off and forget it. But they wouldn't listen. They thought they could control it. They thought humanity was only a shadow. Now," he trailed off, shaking his head. Kale pressed him. "What have you heard?" Jaren hesitated, then passed Kale a coded device. "This is from a fleet scout. It should have been destroyed with the others, but somehow it slipped through. Don't ask me how I got it." Kale activated the device. Static hissed, then a broken voice cut through, filled with panic. "This is Captain Relis. Fleet compromised. Unknown vessel. No, not unknown, ancient. Gods, they move like hunters." Screams filled the transmission, weapons fire in the background, then a single cold phrase, in a voice that did not belong to any alien Kyle had ever heard. "You were warned." The message ended in silence. Kyle's hands trembled. The humans were not broadcasting threats. They were not boasting or gloating. They were simply efficient. A voice, a strike, then nothing left behind. Jaren leaned closer, his voice cracking. "Do you see now? This is how every empire ended. Not through decay, not through rivals, but through retaliation. They all thought humanity was gone. They all thought they could trespass. And then, nothing." Kyle wanted to argue, but deep down, He knew Jaren was right. The archives had shown the same pattern, repeated again and again. Challenge humanity and vanish. The Council tried to hide the truth. They sealed the capital's news networks, locked down the hyperlanes, even arrested pilots who spread rumors. But whispers were harder to kill than ships. Stories leaked and panic followed. Merchants abandoned trade routes. Colonists fled frontier systems. Even soldiers muttered about omens and ghosts. Kale received one more piece of evidence, an image smuggled out of the dead sector. Grainy, distorted, but unmistakable. A colossal ship, darker than the void itself, bristling with weapons that glowed faintly like coals in the night. The human insignia was burned into its hull. Kyle stared at it for hours. The ship was not sleek, like council cruisers, not polished like Zaran carriers. It was brutal, functional, built for one purpose only, destruction, and it was awake. Jaren broke the silence. The Council is still sending more fleets. They think numbers will win. They don't understand. Numbers mean nothing to humans. What will they do? Kyle asked softly. What they've always done, Jaren replied. They will retaliate until nothing stands in their way. They do not conquer. They erase. That night, Kyle could not sleep. He sat by his window, watching the stars, waiting for the next signal, the next whisper. And just before dawn, it came. Every screen in his chamber flickered to life. Every comm unit hummed. A single voice, cold and human, echoed through the silence. This is our first and final warning. Leave our shadows. Leave our name. Leave our world. You did not listen. Now we remember. The transmission ended. Moments later, distant sensors lit up across half the galaxy. Entire fleets, council fleets, powerful fleets, gone, not defeated, not crippled, gone, erased in bursts of light. Kale's spines bristled. The retaliation had begun, and for the first time in centuries, the galaxy would learn the lesson every extinct empire had already paid for with blood. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not gone. They were awake. The galaxy was unraveling. Kale Draven felt it in the air, like a storm rolling through the stars. Entire systems were shutting down, fleets no longer answered their comms, and the great trade hubs that once blazed with light now flickered with uncertainty. Yet amid all the chaos, one truth kept gnawing at him. This had happened before. He had seen it in the ancient records, the hidden files that the Council had tried to erase. But now it was no longer a puzzle of the past. It was repeating, unfolding. In front of his very eyes, Jaren's soul met Kale again in the tunnels beneath the capital. His usual calm demeanor was gone. He looked restless, desperate. "It's starting again," he said without waiting for greetings. "We are living the same script every extinct empire followed, and we are following it step by step." Kyle asked quietly, "The same script?" "Yes," Jaren hissed. "First, the discovery, a human relic, a station, a ship, something thought lost. Then, denial. The leaders convince themselves it's harmless. They poke at it, they try to claim it. Next comes retaliation. Fleets vanish, worlds burn, panic spreads. And finally..." Jaren's voice dropped to almost nothing. "Extinction." Kyle froze. His heart raced as he thought of the images burned into his memory, human warships cutting through fleets as if they were nothing, leaving silence in their wake. It was exactly what the records had shown, only now he was living it step by step. Still, he needed proof. His historian's mind demanded more than fear and whispers. He went back to the archives, using every code and backdoor he had left. He pieced together fragments from suppressed histories, the Vereen Dominion, the Haskari Union, the Shol Imperium, empires that had once ruled the galaxy, powerful and proud. And yet, each one had vanished suddenly, inexplicably. Their final transmissions all carried the same thing, a warning ignored, A shadow glimpsed too late, a name whispered in terror: humanity. Kyle trembled as the files played before him. It was as though the dead were speaking across time, their voices merging into one. They had all seen what was coming. None of them had survived it. The council was still blind. They issued rallying cries, promising victory, promising to crush the phantom enemy. More fleets were dispatched, more silence returned. The cycle was locked in place, and nothing could stop it. Kyle couldn't bear the thought. He cornered Jeren again, his voice shaking. "Tell me the truth. If this pattern always ends the same way, is there nothing we can do?" Jeren stared at him for a long moment. His eyes were heavy with the weight of too much knowledge. Finally, he said, "There's only one thing that has ever worked." Kyle leaned forward. "What?" "To stop digging, to stop fighting, to bury everything. We know and hope they don't see us as a threat." But even as Jeren spoke, Kyle knew it was too late. They had already challenged the humans. They had already spilled blood, and humanity did not forget. That night, Kyle stared at the star charts glowing across his console. Each glowing light marked a system lost to silence. Each silence told the same story, the same pattern, the same truth. Every extinct empire thought they were different. Every extinct empire thought they could control the fire. And every one of them ended in ash. Kyle whispered the words aloud, though no one was there to hear them. "We are next." And in the cold dark beyond the stars, something vast moved as if answering him. The pattern was complete. Humanity was coming. The first signs came like distant thunder. Kyle Draven woke to a sky that wasn't the same. From his chamber window, he saw streaks of light tearing across the horizon, council defenses firing into the void. The capital world, proud and untouchable for 1,000 years, was under siege, but it wasn't pirates. It wasn't rival empires. It was them, humanity. For centuries they had been only a whisper, a cursed name buried in forbidden archives. For weeks they had been shadows in the dark, unseen but deadly. Now they were here in full force. The humans didn't announce themselves with speeches or demands. They didn't march forward in ceremony like the council fleets. They arrived like predators, fast and precise. Massive ships slid out of the void, their black hulls blotting out the stars. Weapons glowed with a quiet, terrifying light. One by one, the capital's defenses fell silent. Kyle could see the council's desperation firsthand. Their fleets surged from orbit, brilliant in numbers, thousands of ships arrayed in formation. They looked mighty, they looked unstoppable, until the humans moved. The human warships advanced like blades through water. Their weapons didn't flash or scream, they whispered, and yet wherever they struck, entire council cruisers disintegrated in silence. Whole wings of ships were erased in minutes. Kyle's spines bristled as he realized what he was witnessing. This was not a battle. This was a reckoning. The council's command broadcasts grew frantic. Orders overlapped. Retreat clashed with advance. Leaders screamed and soldiers begged for clarity. But the humans needed no chatter, no wasted breath. Their silence was their language, and death followed it. Jeren's soul rushed into Kyle's chambers, pale and breathless. "It's happening. Do you understand now? This is the end. This is how every empire fell." Kyle could hardly breathe. His voice cracked. "What do they want? Why destroy us?" Jeren's eyes burned with fear. "They don't destroy us because they want to rule. They destroy us because we didn't listen. Every empire ignored the warnings. Every empire touched what should never have been touched. Every empire challenged them. And now..." A tremor shook the city as a human warship descended low over the capital, its shadows stretching across towers and spires. It didn't fire, not yet. It simply hovered, watching. Single transmission cut across every frequency, carried in a human voice that was calm, cold, and merciless. "You were warned. The words froze the galaxy. Every screen, every speaker, every comm unit carried that voice. Then silence followed, not the silence of peace, but the silence before fire. Moments later, the capital sky lit up in white flame. Towers crumbled. Defenses fell. The Council's great fleet was gone. Kyle stood there, watching his world burn, and finally understood. This wasn't just another war. This was the truth behind every extinction he had studied, every empire that vanished. The humans did not negotiate. They did not conquer. They erased. And now it was their turn. Kyle whispered to himself as the sky fell apart. The reckoning has returned. The capital was ash. Smoke choked the sky, and the proud towers of the council lay in ruins. Across the galaxy, silence stretched like a wound. No fleets moved, no orders were given. Every surviving world waited, breathless, for what would come next. Kyle Draven stood among the rubble, his scales darkened by soot, his mind hollow. He had seen history repeat itself with his own eyes. Every extinct empire he had studied, now his people were joining them. The cycle had come full circle, but it wasn't over. Not yet. The human ships still lingered in orbit, dark and immense, blotting out the stars. They hadn't withdrawn. They hadn't pressed forward to occupy. They simply hovered in the void, silent and patient, as if considering whether the galaxy deserved to go on. Then, without warning, every screen across every surviving system flickered to life. Kyle's personal console lit up. So did the broken terminals around him. The same signal reached colonies, stations, even deep space mining rigs. No one could escape it. A single human figure appeared, faceless in shadow. The voice that followed was calm, even, but colder than the void itself. "This is our last message." Kale's spines rose as the words echoed through the ruins. Around him, survivors fell silent, listening with trembling hearts. "You were warned," the voice continued. "We did not ask for worship. We did not ask for obedience. We asked only for silence, for our name to remain buried, for our ruins to remain untouched. Again and again your empires refused. Again and again you disturbed what was never meant for you, and so again and again you vanished." Images flared on the screen. Glimpses of long-dead civilizations, each one falling in fire. The Virene, the Haskari, the Shoal, now the Council. The pattern was undeniable. The voice spoke once more. "This is not conquest. We do not rule. We do not build empires. We leave only warnings. Those who do not listen do not remain." The figure leaned forward, the shadow almost burning into Kale's mind. "Remember this. Speak our name again, and your worlds will burn. Dig into our past, and your people will vanish. Cross our shadow, and you will join the silence. This is your final chance. Choose survival or choose extinction." The transmission ended. The human ships lingered for one last moment, their weapons glowing faintly like dying embers. Then, as silently as they had arrived, they slipped back into the dark, vanishing without a trace. Across the galaxy, no one spoke. The message was clear. The pattern was complete. Humanity had delivered its final warning. Kyle stared into the smoke-filled sky, his chest heavy. He had wanted the truth. He had dug into the archives, desperate for answers. Now he had them, and the truth was worse than any myth. Every extinct empire had made the same mistake. They had challenged humanity, and, in the end, humanity always answered.